Admiral Kexthor stood on the bridge of his massive warship, looking out at the stars through the wide viewing window. His ship was one of 50 that made up the largest attack fleet the Zephyrian Empire had ever sent to conquer a new world. Each ship was over 2 miles long and packed with enough weapons to destroy entire cities in seconds. The Zephyrians had been expanding across the galaxy for over 300 years. They were tall, gray-skinned beings with large black eyes and long fingers that could work their advanced computers faster than any other species they had met. Their technology was far beyond anything most worlds possessed. Plasma cannons that could melt through any armor, shields that could stop nuclear weapons, and ships that could travel between stars in days instead of years. Kexthor had personally led the conquest of 12 different worlds. The pattern was always the same. His fleet would arrive, demand surrender, and within hours the local government would give up. Sometimes a few brave souls would try to fight back with their primitive weapons, but it never lasted long. Most species were smart enough to know when they were beaten. This new target was different, though. The planet was called Terra by its inhabitants, though the Zephyrian computers had designated it as Target World 847. It was a small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star in what humans called the Milky Way galaxy. The dominant species called themselves humans, and from what the scouts had reported, they were barely more advanced than cave dwellers. The humans had only recently developed nuclear weapons, which the Zephyrians considered ancient technology. They had managed to send a few small ships to their moon and had built a tiny space station, but that was about as far as their space program had advanced. Most of their population still lived on the surface of their world, crowded into cities that would be easy targets for the Zephyrian plasma cannons. What made this conquest even easier was that the humans were divided. Instead of having one government like most civilized worlds, Terra had nearly 200 different countries. These countries often fought with each other and seemed unable to work together on anything important. The Zephyrian military analysts were confident that this division would make the conquest swift and easy. Captain Vexna, Kexthor's second-in-command, approached with a data pad in her long fingers. She was younger than the admiral but had proven herself in battle against the Centaurian rebels 5 years earlier. Her black eyes showed the same confidence that filled the entire bridge crew. "Admiral, our scouts have completed their final report on Terra," she said, handing him the pad. "The humans have approximately 8 billion individuals spread across 7 continents. Their most advanced weapons are nuclear missiles, but they only have a few thousand of them. Our shields can easily stop anything they might fire at us." Kexthor looked at the information on the pad. Pictures showed human cities with primitive buildings made of concrete and steel. Their military forces used projectile weapons that fired small metal bullets, technology the Zephyrians had abandoned centuries ago. Their aircraft were slow and clumsy compared to Zephyrian fighters. "How long do you estimate the conquest will take?" Kexthor asked. "No more than 72 hours, Admiral. Probably less. Once we demonstrate our superior firepower, their governments will surrender rather than see their cities destroyed. It is the logical choice." Kexthor nodded. It was always the logical choice. No species had ever been foolish enough to continue fighting once they saw what Zephyrian technology could do to their world. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Jake Morrison was having trouble sleeping. He stood in the control room of the Planetary Defense Initiative headquarters, a new facility built deep inside a mountain in Colorado. The PDI had been created just 2 years earlier, when Earth's governments finally agreed they needed to prepare for the possibility of contact with hostile alien species. Jake was a former Air Force pilot who had been chosen to lead the PDI because of his experience with experimental aircraft and his ability to think quickly under pressure. He was 35 years old, with short brown hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to notice everything around him. Right now, those eyes were focused on a computer screen showing data from deep space monitoring stations around the solar system. Dr. Lisa Grant sat at the station next to him, her fingers moving quickly over her keyboard as she analyzed the strange readings they had been detecting for the past 3 weeks. Lisa was one of the world's best experts on the possibility of alien life. She had spent years studying what alien biology might look like and how different species might communicate. "Jake, look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a wave pattern on her screen. These energy readings are definitely not natural. Something big is moving through space toward our solar system, and it's using technology we don't understand. Captain Tony Hayes walked over from the communications station. Tony was a former Navy SEAL who had joined the PDI when it became clear that any alien contact might require military action. He was a big man with thick arms and a serious expression that rarely changed, but Jake knew he was one of the smartest tactical thinkers in the military. "How big are we talking about?" Tony asked. Lisa checked her calculations again. "Based on the energy output, I'd say we're looking at multiple large objects, maybe as many as 50, each one bigger than anything humans have ever built." Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her communication equipment. Amy was 26 years old and had joined the PDI straight from college, where she had studied languages and communication systems. She was responsible for monitoring all the radio frequencies that might carry alien messages. "I'm picking up something else," Amy said, adjusting her headphones. "There's a transmission coming from the same direction as those energy readings. It's not random static. This is definitely an organized signal, like someone trying to communicate." Jake felt his stomach tighten. For 2 years, the PDI had been preparing for this moment. But now that it was actually happening, he realized how little they really knew about what they might be facing. Earth's weapons were designed to fight other humans, not advanced alien species with unknown technology. "How long until they reach Earth?" Jake asked. Lisa looked at her calculations one more time. "At their current speed, maybe 2 weeks. Possibly less if they can go faster than what we're seeing now." The 4 team members looked at each other in silence. They all knew what this meant. After millions of years of wondering if humans were alone in the universe, they were about to get their answer. And based on the size of whatever was coming toward Earth, it might not be the friendly first contact that optimistic scientists had always hoped for. Jake walked to the secure phone that connected directly to the White House and the Pentagon. It was time to wake up some very important people and tell them that humanity's greatest test was about to begin. The Zephyrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's moon with a flash of blue light that lit up the dark side of Luna. 50 massive warships, each one gleaming silver in the sunlight, positioned themselves in a perfect formation that could be seen from Earth with basic telescopes. Admiral Kexthor had chosen this dramatic entrance on purpose. He wanted the humans to see exactly what they were facing. On the bridge of his flagship, Kexthor activated the communication system that would broadcast his message to every radio, television, and computer network on the planet below. He had given this same speech to dozens of other species, and it had always worked. The words were simple and direct, designed to make surrender seem like the only logical choice. "People of Terra." His voice echoed across Earth in every major language, translated by Zephyrian computers. "I am Admiral Kexthor of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our territory. You have 72 hours to surrender completely. Lay down all weapons, dissolve your governments, and prepare for new management. If you comply, your species will be allowed to continue existing under our rule. If you resist, your cities will be destroyed and your population reduced to a manageable size. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact." The message ended, and Kexthor sat back in his command chair with satisfaction. By now, every government on Earth would be in panic. Their leaders would be calling emergency meetings. Their military commanders would be looking at their pathetic weapons and realizing how hopeless their situation was. Within hours, the surrender offers would start coming in, but that was not what happened. President Helen Martinez sat in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by the most important people in the American government. General Rick Taylor from EDO, the Pentagon, was on her right, and Dr. Carl Peterson from NASA was on her left. Video screens around the room showed similar meetings happening in every major capital on Earth. London, Moscow, Beijing, New Delhi, Tokyo, Berlin. Everyone was connected to the same emergency conference call. "Well," President Martinez said after the alien message finished playing, "I think we can all agree that diplomacy is not going to work here." The British Prime Minister spoke from London. Our military analysts have been studying those ships since they appeared. The energy readings are beyond anything we've ever seen. If they wanted to destroy us right now, they probably could. Maybe, said General Taylor. But they gave us 72 hours. That means they want something from us alive. Dead planets are no good to anyone. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from the PDI headquarters in Colorado. We've been tracking these ships for 2 weeks. Dr. Grant has some theories about their technology that might be useful. Dr. Lisa Grant's voice joined the conversation. Based on their energy signatures, I believe their weapons work by superheating matter into plasma. That's incredibly effective against most targets, but it has weaknesses. Plasma weapons have trouble with certain materials, and they require enormous amounts of power. If we could find a way to drain their energy or disrupt their power systems. The Russian president interrupted. You are talking about fighting back against aliens who can travel between stars. Our missiles cannot even reach their ships properly. Actually, said Dr. Peterson, that might not be true. Our deep space tracking shows that their ships had to slow down significantly when they entered our solar system. They're not as fast or maneuverable as we first thought, and they positioned themselves near the moon, which means they're operating within the range of some of our weapons. Captain Maya Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system from the International Space Station. I've been watching them through our telescopes up here. Those ships are huge, but they're also spread out in a very organized formation. It's like they're not expecting any real resistance. They're positioned for intimidation, not for battle. President Martinez looked around the room. So what are you all telling me? That we might actually have a chance? Commander Morrison answered. I'm telling you that we have something these aliens probably haven't seen before. Every other species they've conquered was probably unified under one government. They expect us to act like one big target. Instead, we're 200 different countries with different militaries, different strategies, and different ways of thinking. General Taylor nodded. Jake's right. These aliens are used to dealing with one enemy at a time. They send their ultimatum. The government surrenders and it's over. But we don't have one government. We have dozens of nuclear powers, hundreds of different military forces, and billions of people who have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know how to fight. The Chinese premier spoke up. This is assuming we can work together. Historically, that has been difficult. Historically, President Martinez said, we've never faced extinction by aliens. I think that changes things. Over the next 6 hours, something unprecedented happened on Earth. While the Zephyrian fleet waited confidently for surrender messages, the human governments were doing something that had never been achieved in the entire history of their species. They were creating a unified command structure. It was not easy. Arguments broke out over who would be in charge, what strategies to use, and how to coordinate military forces that had been designed to fight each other. But slowly, a plan began to emerge. Commander Morrison found himself at the center of it all. The PDI headquarters became the communication hub for the entire planet. Lieutenant Amy Foster worked 18 hours straight, coordinating messages between governments, military commanders, and civilian organizations. Her language skills proved invaluable as she helped translate not just words, but entire concepts between cultures that had never really trusted each other. Captain Tony Hayes began working with military leaders from around the world, sharing intelligence about the alien ships and coordinating the positioning of Earth's weapons. The nuclear powers began quietly moving their missiles and submarines into new positions. Air forces started preparing for a type of battle they had never imagined. Dr. Lisa Grant worked with scientists from every major university and research center on Earth, analyzing every piece of data they could gather about Zephyrian technology. Physicists in Switzerland talked to engineers in Japan, who shared information with researchers in Brazil. For the first time in human history, every scientific mind on the planet was working toward the same goal. Back on the Zephyrian flagship, Captain Vexena approached Admiral Kexthor with a puzzled expression. Admiral, we're not receiving any surrender messages from the human governments. Kexthor looked up from his tactical display. It has only been 6 hours. Some species take longer to accept reality than others. The Centaurians held out for almost a full day before they saw reason. Yes, sir, but our monitoring systems are detecting unusual activity on the planet's surface. Military forces are moving, but not in retreat patterns. They appear to be repositioning. Kexthor stood up and walked to the main viewing screen, which showed Earth hanging in space below them. The blue and white planet looked peaceful and defenseless, just like every other world they had conquered. Repositioning for what? He asked. They have nothing that can threaten us. But even as he said it, Admiral Kexthor felt the first small doubt creep into his mind. In all his years of conquest, he had never seen a species respond to his ultimatum by organizing themselves instead of panicking. The humans were doing something unexpected, and in warfare, unexpected was always dangerous. 48 hours had passed since the Zephyrian ultimatum, and Admiral Kexthor was becoming increasingly confused by human behavior. His intelligence officers reported that instead of preparing for surrender, the humans were doing something that made no military sense. They were moving their forces away from their cities and spreading them out across their entire planet. Admiral, Captain Vexna said, studying her tactical display, the humans have moved most of their aircraft to small airfields in remote areas. Their naval vessels are scattered across all their oceans instead of protecting their major ports. Even their ground forces are positioned in mountains and forests rather than defending population centers. Kexthor examined the reports with growing irritation. This is irrational behavior. They are abandoning their most valuable targets and spreading their forces too thin to be effective anywhere. It is as if they want us to destroy their cities. What the Admiral did not understand was that Commander Jake Morrison and his team had spent the last 2 days developing a strategy that went against every rule of conventional warfare. They were not trying to protect specific locations. Instead, they were turning the entire planet Earth into a weapon. Deep inside the Colorado Mountain, Jake stood before a massive wall display that showed every continent on Earth. Red dots marked the positions of military units, while blue lines showed communication networks that now connected every major government and military command center on the planet. For the first time in human history, Earth had a single unified command structure. Dr. Lisa Grant had made a crucial discovery about the Zephyrian ships. Their sensors were incredibly advanced, but they had been designed to scan for technology and large energy sources. They were not equipped to detect certain types of natural phenomena that were common on Earth, but rare on other worlds. The aliens expect us to fight them in space or in the air, Jake explained to the military commanders gathered around the display. But we're going to do something they won't expect. We're going to make them come down to us, into our atmosphere, where we know the terrain and they don't. General Rick Taylor nodded grimly. It's risky. If we can't hurt them once they're down here, we'll have alien warships flying over our heads with nothing to stop them. That's where Dr. Peterson's research comes in, Jake said. Dr. Carl Peterson stepped forward, holding a data tablet filled with calculations. We've been studying Earth's magnetic field and atmospheric conditions. The aliens' ships generate enormous electromagnetic signatures that will interact with our planet's natural magnetic field in ways they probably haven't considered. If we can amplify those interactions, Captain Tony Hayes interrupted. You're talking about using the whole planet as a weapon. Exactly, Jake said. Captain Rodriguez has been monitoring the alien ships from the space station. Maya, tell them what you've observed. Captain Maya Rodriguez's voice came through the communication system from her command post in the Rocky Mountains, where she had been relocated when the space station was evacuated. The alien ships maintain their position using some kind of gravitational manipulation technology. But every time they adjust their position, our instruments detect fluctuations in Earth's magnetic field. They're already affecting our planet just by being here. Lieutenant Amy Foster looked up from her communications console. I've been coordinating with amateur radio operators around the world. The aliens' presence is causing interference with radio signals in patterns we've never seen before. If we could amplify that interference, Dr. Lisa Grant added, I've been working with geologists and seismologists worldwide. Dr. Nina Clark at Yellowstone has discovered something interesting about tectonic activity since the aliens arrived. Jake activated another screen that showed a map of earthquake activity around the world. Tell them, Nina. Dr. Nina Clark's voice came from the Yellowstone Research Station. The gravitational fields from the alien ships are causing minor stress changes in Earth's tectonic plates. The changes are small, but they're measurable. If we could time our response to coordinate with natural seismic activity, Colonel Steve Murphy's voice joined the conversation from his command center in the European Alps. You're talking about using earthquakes as weapons? I'm talking about using everything, Jake said. Mountains, oceans, the atmosphere, the magnetic field, even the rotation of the planet itself. The aliens see Earth as just another rock in space, but this rock has been our home for thousands of years. We know every trick it can do. Admiral Kate Williams spoke from her position in the Pacific Fleet Command Center. The submarines are reporting unusual sonar readings. The alien ships are affecting ocean currents and thermal layers. If we position our forces correctly, we might be able to use those changes to our advantage. Dr. Paul Anderson's voice crackled through from CERN in Switzerland. We've been running calculations on the particle accelerators. If we coordinate with the other research facilities around the world, we might be able to create localized gravitational anomalies that could interfere with the aliens' propulsion systems. Jake looked around at all the screens showing military, leaders, scientists, and government officials from every continent on Earth. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to let them attack our cities. The room fell silent. President Helen Martinez's voice came through the communication system. Jake, I hope you know what you're doing. When they come down to attack our population centers, they'll be entering our atmosphere at low altitude. That's when we spring the trap. Every mountain range becomes a fortress. Every ocean becomes a maze. Every city becomes bait in a trap that covers the entire planet. Captain Tony Hayes studied the tactical display. You're assuming they'll take the bait. What if they just stay in orbit and bombard us from space? They won't, Dr. Lisa Grant said. I've been analyzing their previous conquests. The Zephyrians don't destroy worlds completely. They want to rule them. That means they need the infrastructure intact and the population alive but defeated. They'll come down to occupy our cities, not destroy them from orbit. Jake activated the final part of the display, showing a complex web of connections between military units, scientific installations, and communication networks spanning the entire globe. Operation Beehive is now active. Every person on this planet, military or civilian, is now part of a single defense network. When the aliens come down, they won't be fighting separate armies from different countries. They'll be fighting the entire planet Earth. 24 hours remained until the Zephyrian deadline. Across the world, human military forces took their positions in places the aliens would never expect. Mountain troops prepared ambushes in narrow valleys. Naval forces positioned themselves to use ocean thermal layers as camouflage. Air Force units spread out among thousands of small airfields, ready to coordinate attacks from every direction at once. Scientists at research facilities on every continent prepared to turn their equipment into weapons. The Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, radio telescopes in Australia, seismic monitoring stations along earthquake zones, even weather monitoring systems were all connected to the global defense network. In cities around the world, civilians were evacuated to underground shelters, but not to hide. They were positioned to coordinate communications, provide intelligence, and support the military units spread across the planet's surface. Admiral Kexthor looked at his chronometer. 24 hours remained until the human surrender deadline. His ships were ready to begin the bombardment that would force the stubborn humans to accept Zephyrian rule. He was confident that once they saw a few of their cities burning, the remaining governments would quickly surrender. What he did not know was that the humans had just finished preparing the largest trap in the history of warfare. They were not trying to protect their cities. They were using their cities as bait to lure 50 alien warships down into the atmosphere of a planet that was about to fight back with everything it had. The trap was set. Now all they had to do was wait for the aliens to take the bait. The 72-hour deadline expired at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, Pacific time. Admiral Kexthor had received no surrender messages from Earth. The stubborn humans had chosen to resist, just like a few other foolish species before them. It was time to teach them the price of defying the Zephyrian Empire. Begin the assault, Kexthor ordered from his flagship's bridge. Target their major population centers. Destroy enough to break their spirit. but leave the infrastructure intact. We will need those cities once they surrender. 50 Zephyrian warships began their descent through Earth's atmosphere, their plasma cannons charged with deadly energy, as they approached targets in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Each ship was the size of a small city, casting enormous shadows on the ground below as they prepared to demonstrate the futility of human resistance. The first target was New York City. 3 Zephyrian ships positioned themselves over Manhattan, their weapons aimed at the skyscrapers below. But as they descended to an altitude of 5,000 feet, something unexpected happened. Commander Jake Morrison sat in the PDI command center, watching displays that showed the positions of all 50 alien ships. "They're taking the bait," he said into his microphone. "All units, Operation Beehive is now active. Remember, wait for my signal." The Zephyrian ships over New York opened fire, sending streams of superheated plasma down toward the city, but their targeting system suddenly went haywire. What should have been precise strikes on major buildings instead scattered randomly across empty streets and abandoned structures. Captain Vexna stared at her instruments in confusion. "Admiral, our targeting computers are malfunctioning. The electromagnetic interference down there is stronger than anything in our databases." What she did not know was that Lieutenant Amy Foster had coordinated with every radio station, cell phone tower, and electronic device in New York City to create a massive electromagnetic pulse at the exact moment the ships opened fire. The pulse disrupted the alien sensors and targeting systems, causing their first attack to miss every important target. But that was only the beginning. Dr. Paul Anderson activated the particle accelerators at CERN and 12 other research facilities around the world simultaneously. The coordinated burst of energy created gravitational anomalies that pulled at the Zephyrian ships, making them struggle to maintain their positions in the atmosphere. Over the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Kate Williams watched from her command ship as 3 Zephyrian vessels descended toward the naval base at Pearl Harbor. "Now," she whispered into her radio. Submarines positioned throughout the Pacific fired specially modified torpedoes that had been equipped with electromagnetic pulse warheads. The weapons were not designed to destroy the alien ships but to interfere with their sensors. As the Zephyrian vessels tried to target the naval base, they found themselves flying blind through clouds of electromagnetic static. At the same time, Dr. Nina Clark triggered controlled seismic charges along the San Andreas fault line. The carefully calculated explosion created a localized earthquake that sent shockwaves through the ground beneath the alien ships. The Zephyrians had never encountered a planet that could literally shake them out of the sky. Colonel Steve Murphy coordinated the European response from his position in the Swiss Alps. As Zephyrian ships descended toward major cities in France, Germany, and Italy, European military forces used the mountain ranges as giant amplifiers for electromagnetic pulses. The mountains focused and directed the energy bursts with pinpoint accuracy, creating dead zones where alien sensors simply stopped working. In Asia, similar tactics were being used with different terrain. Chinese forces used the Himalayan mountains to create avalanches that filled the air with debris clouds, making it impossible for the aliens to see their targets clearly. Japanese units coordinated with seismic monitoring stations to create precisely timed ground tremors that threw off the aliens' navigation systems. Admiral Kexthor realized something was terribly wrong when reports started coming in from all 50 of his ships. Every single vessel was experiencing technical difficulties that their computers could not explain. Weapons were missing their targets, navigation systems were failing, and sensor readings were becoming unreliable. "This is impossible," he said, studying the tactical display. "The humans have primitive technology. They should not be capable of interfering with our systems." Captain Maya Rodriguez coordinated the next phase of the attack from her mobile command center in the Rocky Mountains. "All air units begin Phase 2, she announced. Around the world, thousands of human aircraft took off from small airfields that the aliens had not bothered to target. These were not large military bases that would show up on Zephyrian sensors, but tiny landing strips hidden in forests, deserts, and mountain valleys. Fighter jets, cargo planes, and even civilian aircraft that had been converted to carry electromagnetic pulse devices rose into the sky from every direction at once. The Zephyrian ships found themselves surrounded by swarms of small, fast-moving aircraft that appeared and disappeared like insects. Each human plane carried devices designed by Dr. Lisa Grant to emit specific electromagnetic frequencies that interfered with alien biology as well as their technology. Captain Tony Hayes led Special Forces teams in urban areas that had become three-dimensional battlefields. As alien ships descended toward cities, they found that the buildings themselves had been turned into weapons. Skyscrapers had been equipped with powerful transmitters that created dead zones for alien communications. Underground tunnels allowed human forces to move unseen beneath the alien ships, coordinating attacks from angles the Zephyrians never expected. The turning point came when Captain Maya Rodriguez made a desperate decision. One of the largest Zephyrian ships was hovering over Los Angeles, trying to target the city's downtown area despite the electromagnetic interference. Maya knew that if that ship succeeded in destroying a major population center, it might break human morale. "I'm going in," she announced over the radio, climbing into a modified fighter jet that had been equipped with experimental technology. "Maya, that's suicide." Jake Morrison's voice crackled through her headphones. "Maybe," she replied, "but somebody has to show these aliens that humans don't give up." Maya flew her aircraft directly at the massive Zephyrian ship, dodging plasma fire that lit up the sky around her. But she was not trying to destroy the alien vessel with weapons. Instead, her plane was equipped with the most powerful electromagnetic pulse device that human science could create. She flew directly into the ship's shield generator array and detonated the device. The electromagnetic pulse overloaded the Zephyrian ship's power systems, causing its shields to fail and its weapons to shut down. The massive vessel began to fall toward the Pacific Ocean, its crew helpless to stop the crash. Around the world, other human pilots saw what Maya had done and began similar attacks. They used their small, fast aircraft like guided missiles, sacrificing themselves to disable the alien ship's critical systems. Admiral Kex Thor watched in horror as his fleet began falling from the sky. Ship after ship reported critical system failures as the humans continued their impossible coordinated attack. These primitive beings were doing something that no species in Zephyrian history had ever accomplished. They were winning. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice filled with disbelief. "All ships, withdraw to safe distance." But it was too late. Dr. Anderson's particle accelerators created a gravitational web around Earth that made it difficult for the damaged Zephyrian ships to escape the planet's atmosphere. Like insects caught in a spider's web, the alien vessels found themselves trapped by the very planet they had tried to conquer. As his own flagship began to lose power and descend toward the ocean, Admiral Kex Thor finally understood what his intelligence reports had missed. Earth was not just another planet with a primitive species. It was a world where an entire civilization had learned to fight as one organism, using their planet itself as a weapon. The humans had turned their greatest weakness into their greatest strength. Instead of being divided by different countries and governments, they had used their diversity to create a defense strategy that no single species could have imagined. Every culture, every piece of knowledge, every natural feature of their world had become part of a coordinated attack that the galaxy had never seen before. As his ship crashed into the Pacific Ocean, Kex Thor realized that the Zephyrian Empire had just learned a lesson that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Kex Thor floated in the emergency life pod that had ejected from his crashed flagship, moments before it hit the Pacific Ocean. Through the small window, he could see the burning wreckage of his once mighty warship sinking beneath the waves. Around him, similar scenes were playing out across Earth's oceans and continents as the remnants of 50 Zephyrian ships littered the planet's surface. The Admiral's communication device crackled to life with reports from the few ships that had managed to escape Earth's atmosphere. Out of 50 vessels that had begun the assault, only 12 were still capable of flight and all of them were severely damaged. In 3 centuries of conquest, the Zephyrian Empire had never suffered such a devastating defeat. Captain Vexna's voice came through the communicator from one of the retreating ships. "Admiral, we are detecting human aircraft approaching your position. Do you wish us to attempt a rescue?" Kex Thor looked up at the sky, where he could see small human aircraft circling overhead. By all rights, they should be coming to capture. Or kill him. That was what any logical species would do to the leader of an invasion force. But something strange was happening instead. One of the aircraft landed on the water near his life pod. As it approached, Kexthor could see a human pilot, inside. To his amazement, the human was not pointing weapons at him. Instead, the pilot was throwing him a rope to pull his life pod to safety. Commander Jake Morrison's voice came through speakers on the rescue aircraft. Admiral Kexthor, this is Commander Morrison of Earth's Planetary Defense Initiative. We are offering you medical assistance and safe passage off our planet, along with your surviving crew members. The Zephyrian admiral stared in disbelief. You are rescuing your enemies? You are no longer our enemies, Jake replied. Your invasion has failed, and your ships are destroyed. Now you are just people who need help. That is what humans do. We help people who need help. Over the next several hours, human rescue teams pulled Zephyrian survivors from crash sites around the world. Medical teams treated alien injuries using hastily adapted equipment. Linguists worked to establish better communication with the captured aliens. Throughout it all, the humans showed a level of compassion toward their former attackers that left the Zephyrians completely confused. Dr. Lisa Grant interviewed several Zephyrian crew members at a temporary medical facility in California. She wanted to understand not just their technology, but their psychology and culture. What she learned changed everything humans thought they knew about the galaxy. Your species has conquered dozens of worlds, she said to a young Zephyrian engineer named Yextal. How many of those species fought back? All of them tried to fight at first, Yextal replied, his large black eyes showing confusion about his current situation. But they always stopped when they realized they could not win. It is the logical response to overwhelming force. But humans didn't stop fighting when we realized we couldn't win with conventional weapons, Dr. Grant said. We changed what winning meant. Lieutenant Amy Foster had been monitoring communications from the 12 surviving Zephyrian ships that had escaped to the outer solar system. The conversation she was overhearing told her that word of the defeat was already spreading throughout the Zephyrian Empire. Jake, she said, approaching Commander Morrison in the PDI command center. You need to hear this. The aliens are sending messages back to their homeworlds, and they're not just reporting a military defeat. They're reporting something they say is impossible. Jake listened to the translated alien communications with growing amazement. The Zephyrian survivors were not just telling their government that they had been defeated by primitive humans. They were describing a species that fought as a unified organism while maintaining individual diversity, a planet that could coordinate its defense across an entire world, and a people who showed mercy to defeated enemies even after those enemies had tried to destroy them. Captain Tony Hayes joined the conversation. According to our analysis of their ship computers, the Zephyrians have detailed records of every species they've ever encountered. None of them ever coordinated a planetary defense the way we did. Most species either surrendered immediately or fought in small, separate groups that were easily defeated. Dr. Carl Peterson had been studying the wreckage of the alien ships with teams of scientists from around the world. Their technology is impressive, but it's designed for fighting conventional enemies. They've never encountered a species that could turn an entire planet into a weapon system. Our approach was so far outside their experience that their computers couldn't even process what we were doing. President Helen Martinez called an emergency meeting of world leaders to discuss what had happened and what it meant for Earth's future. The video conference included every major government on the planet, just as it had during the crisis. We need to understand what we've accomplished here, she said. This wasn't just a military victory. We've proven that humanity can work together when faced with an existential threat. The question is, can we keep working together now that the threat is over? General Rick Taylor provided the military perspective. Our defense network is still active and could be used against any future alien threats. But more importantly, we've shown the galaxy that Earth is not an easy target. The Zephyrian survivors will spread the word that attacking this planet is not worth the cost. Admiral Kate Williams added, according to the alien prisoners, the Zephyrian Empire controls hundreds of worlds. but they all surrendered without much of a fight. We may be the first species to defeat them in open combat. That changes the balance of power in this part of the galaxy. 3 weeks after the battle, Admiral Kexthor was brought before Commander Morrison for a final meeting. Before being released with the other Zephyrian survivors, the alien leader had spent his time in human custody, trying to understand how his superior technology and overwhelming numbers had been defeated by a species he had considered primitive. "I have studied your species during my captivity," Kexthor said, his voice filled with something that sounded like respect. "You should not have been able to coordinate the defense you achieved. Your governments hate each other. Your cultures are completely different. Your military forces use different equipment and tactics. By all logical analysis, you should have been easy to conquer." "That's where you made your mistake," Jake replied. "You analyzed us as if we were like every other species you've met. But humans are different. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, which means we've learned every possible way to fight. When we needed to work together, we already knew how to use all of those different fighting styles as parts of one big strategy." "There is something else," Kexthor said. "Your species showed mercy to defeated enemies. In 3 centuries of conquest, I have never seen that behavior. Why did you not kill us when you had the chance?" Jake smiled. "Because that's not who we are. Humans fight when we have to, but we don't fight because we enjoy it. We fight to protect what we love, not to destroy what we hate. There's a difference." The Zephyrian admiral nodded slowly. "I will carry this message back to my people. Earth is not to be attacked again. Not because your weapons are superior, but because your species is too dangerous to fight on your home ground." As the surviving Zephyrian ships left Earth's solar system, they carried with them a warning that would spread throughout the galaxy. There was a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system where a species called humans had done the impossible. They had turned their entire world into a weapon and fought back against superior technology with nothing but coordination, determination, and the refusal to accept defeat. The message that spread from world to world was simple. Do not attack Earth. The humans who live there have learned to make their planet fight back, and no species in the galaxy is prepared for that kind of war. Commander Jake Morrison stood in the PDI command center, looking at the displays that still showed the global defense network that had saved their world. The network was still active, connecting every government and military force on Earth. For the first time in human history, their species had truly worked as one. "Think we can keep this going?" Captain Tony Hayes asked. Jake looked at the screens, showing peaceful communications between former enemies, shared scientific research, and coordinated space exploration projects. "I think we just learned that when humans work together, we can do anything. Even the galaxy is going to have to get used to that idea." Earth had become more than just another world in the galaxy. It had become a warning, a lesson, and a hope, all at the same time. The species that lived there had proven that some planets are too dangerous to attack, not because of their weapons, but because of their people.
Admiral Laura Mitchell stood perfectly still on the bridge of the USS Vanguard. Her hands were clasped behind her back, and her eyes were fixed on the viewport. The stars looked peaceful from here. They always did. But Laura knew that peace was a lie. Beyond those stars lay the homeworld of the most brutal empire the galaxy had ever known. The bridge was quiet. Every officer knew the importance of this moment. They had trained for years. They had sacrificed everything. And now, they were finally here. Commander Kevin Price sat at his station monitoring the ship systems. He was a tall man with short brown hair and steady hands. Nothing ever seemed to shake him. That was why Laura had requested him for this mission. She needed people who could stay calm when everything went wrong. "All systems are green, Admiral," Kevin reported in a low voice. "Stealth drives are holding at optimal levels. The Zorvani have no idea we are here." Laura nodded but said nothing. She was thinking about the 300 warships floating in formation behind the Vanguard. Every single one of them was invisible to enemy sensors. Every single one of them was armed with weapons the Zorvani could not imagine. And every single one of them was crewed by men and women who understood what was at stake. The Zorvani Imperial Dominion had ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 200 years. They had conquered 12 different species during that time. They had burned worlds that resisted. They had enslaved billions of innocent beings. They had built their empire on suffering and death, and they had never heard of humanity. Earth had first detected Zorvani signals 60 years ago. A deep space probe had picked up transmissions from a slave convoy, transporting captured Vendari to a mining colony. The images had shocked the world. Blue-skinned beings packed into cargo holds like animals. Children separated from parents. Bodies thrown into space when they died from exhaustion. The governments of Earth had made a decision that day. They would not reveal themselves to the galaxy. They would not announce their presence to this brutal empire. Instead, they would watch and wait and prepare. For 60 years, humanity had studied the Zorvani from the shadows. They had learned their language and their culture. They had mapped their territory and counted their ships. They had identified their strengths and their weaknesses. And they had built a fleet, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The phase shift drive was humanity's greatest secret. It allowed ships to exist slightly out of sync with normal space. In this state, they could not be detected by any known sensor technology. They could not be hit by any known weapon. They were ghosts that could appear and disappear at will. Laura remembered the day she had first tested the technology. She had been a young captain then. Her ship had slipped into phase shift and passed directly through a Zorvani patrol without being noticed. She had watched the alien vessels from meters away. She had seen the crew going about their duties completely unaware that death was watching them. That had been 15 years ago. Since then, humanity had built hundreds of phase shift-capable warships in hidden shipyards, scattered across uninhabited systems. They had recruited the best and brightest from every nation on Earth. They had trained them in secret academies far from prying eyes. And now they were ready. Lieutenant Nicole Sanders turned from her communication station. She was young, but brilliant. Her ability to crack alien encryption had proven invaluable during the preparation phase. "Admiral, we are receiving a signal from Earth Command," she said. "Operation Thunderbreak is authorized. The other fleets have confirmed they are in position." Laura felt her heart beat faster. This was the moment. 17 human fleets were positioned at strategic points throughout Zorvani space. They had traveled for months to reach their targets without being detected. They had maintained complete silence to avoid any chance of discovery. "What is the status of the Zorvani home fleet?" Laura asked. Kevin checked his sensors. Approximately 2,000 warships in orbit around Zorvan Prime. Another 500 are stationed at the orbital stations. The Emperor's personal guard fleet is holding position near the palace. 2,500 ships against 300. The numbers seemed impossible. Any other species would have called this mission suicide. But Laura knew something the Zorvani did not. Numbers did not matter when your enemy could not touch you. She turned to face her bridge crew. These men and women had followed her across the galaxy. They had left their families and their homes. They had dedicated their lives to this cause. She owed them words worthy of the moment. 60 years ago, humanity learned that we were not alone in the universe, Laura said. We learned that the galaxy was ruled by those who prey on the weak. We learned that billions of innocent beings lived in chains while their masters grew fat on their suffering. She paused and looked at each officer in turn. We could have hidden. We could have stayed on Earth and hoped the Zorvani never found us. We could have lived our lives in ignorance and let others suffer. But that is not who we are. Humanity does not look away from injustice. Humanity does not abandon the helpless. Humanity fights. Kevin straightened in his chair. Nicole wiped a tear from her eye. Around the bridge, officers nodded with fierce determination. Today we reveal ourselves to the galaxy, Laura continued. Today we show the Zorvani that their reign of terror is over. Today we begin the liberation of every species they have enslaved. This will not be easy. This will not be quick. But it will be done. Because We are human. And we do not quit. She turned back to the viewport and stared at the distant planet where the Emperor sat on his throne of bones, believing himself untouchable. All ships prepare to phase into normal space, Laura ordered. Tactical officers confirm targeting solutions. We will appear in sphere formation, surrounding the enemy fleet. No ship fires until I give the command. Acknowledgements came flooding in from every vessel in the fleet. 300 captains confirming they were ready. 300 crews prepared to fight and die for a cause greater than themselves. Laura took a deep breath. Her father had been a history teacher. He had told her stories of moments that changed everything. Lexington, Normandy, the moon landing. She wondered if he had ever imagined his daughter would create such a moment. Execute phase transition on my mark, she said. The bridge fell silent. Every officer held their breath. Mark. The vanguard shimmered and shifted, and suddenly the stars looked different. The stealth field dropped away, and the ship became solid and real and visible. Around them, 300 human warships appeared from nothing, as if they had always been there. On Zorvan Prime, alarms began to scream. The Emperor's peaceful day was about to be ruined. Humanity had arrived. High Commander Vexar had served the Zorvani Empire for 90 cycles. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had burned cities that dared resist imperial rule. He had watched millions die at his command and felt nothing but pride. His scales were covered with medals of honor, and his name was spoken with fear across the galaxy. He sat upon his command throne aboard the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion and reviewed the morning reports. Everything was as it should be. The fleet was at full strength. The orbital defense platforms were operational. The Emperor was pleased with his service. Vexar clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Life was good when you were the most powerful being in the sector. Nothing could threaten the Zorvani Dominion. Nothing ever had, and nothing ever would. His subordinate officer, Kreltax, approached the throne with a data tablet. High Commander, all vessels report optimal status. The patrol schedules have been updated as you requested. The homeworld remains completely secure. Vexar took the tablet and glanced at the numbers without interest. Security was never a concern here. Zorvan Prime was the most protected world in the Empire. Any enemy foolish enough to attack would face 2,000 warships, crewed by the finest warriors in the galaxy. Dismissed, Vexar said with a wave of his upper right arm. Kreltax bowed and retreated. Vexar leaned back in his throne and allowed himself a moment of relaxation. Perhaps he would visit the pleasure gardens later. Or maybe he would inspect the new batch of slaves that had arrived from the Krelok's territories. He had heard they were particularly obedient after the last round of conditioning. Then the alarms started screaming. Every light on the bridge turned red. Every screen filled with warning symbols. Every officer began shouting at once. Vexar lurched forward in his throne. What is happening? Kreltax ran to the nearest sensor station and stared at the display with all 4 of his eyes wide open. High Commander, we have contacts. Hundreds of contacts appearing all around the fleet. What do you mean, appearing? Ships do not just appear. Where did they come from? End quote. I do not know, High Commander. There were no hyperspace signatures. There were no approach vectors. Vexar pushed himself off the throne and stormed toward the main display. The tactical map showed Zorvan Prime at the center, surrounded by the reassuring blue dots of the Imperial fleet. But now there were red dots everywhere, hundreds of them forming a perfect sphere around his ships. That is impossible, Vexar whispered. The red dots were not moving. They were simply holding position as if waiting for something. Vexar studied their formation with growing unease. These newcomers had placed themselves at optimal firing positions. They had trapped his entire fleet inside their sphere. It was a perfect tactical arrangement. Whoever commanded those ships knew exactly what they were doing. Identify those vessels, Vexar ordered. Match them against our database of known species. Kreltax worked furiously at his station. No match, High Commander. Hull configuration unknown. Power signatures, unknown. Weapon systems, unknown. We have never encountered this species before. A new species. Vexar felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Zorvani had conquered every spacefaring civilization they had ever met. But they had always known their enemies. They had always had time to study them and find their weaknesses. These beings had appeared from nowhere with technology he could not understand. "Open a channel," Vexar commanded. "I want to speak to whoever leads that fleet." Before Kreltax could respond, the main screen flickered. A transmission was cutting through their systems. It was overriding their encryption and accessing their network without permission. That should have been impossible, but it was happening anyway. A face appeared on the screen. It was an alien face, unlike anything Vexar had seen before. Smooth, pale skin with no scales. 2 small eyes instead of 4. A thin mouth that curved slightly upward at the corners. The alien began to speak. The words were translated instantly by the ship computer. "I am Admiral Laura Mitchell of the United Earth Navy. Your Empire's reign of terror ends today. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you do not, we will demonstrate why that would be wise." Vexar stared at the screen in disbelief. This creature was threatening him. This small, soft thing with its ridiculous flat face was actually threatening the High Commander of the Zorvani Imperial Fleet. He began to laugh. The sound echoed across the silent bridge. "You dare speak to me this way? I am High Commander Vexar. I have destroyed civilizations older than your species. I have 2,000 warships under my command. You are outnumbered and outmatched, and you dare threaten me?" The alien female did not react to his words. Her expression remained calm and confident. "You have 59 minutes. The transmission ended. Vexar stood motionless for a long moment. Then rage flooded through him. How dare this creature speak to him as if he were some minor functionary? How dare it cut off the transmission as if he were not worth listening to? "Battle stations," he roared. "All ships to battle stations. Target the largest enemy vessel and prepare to fire." Officers scrambled to obey. Across the fleet, 2,000 warships powered up their weapons. Plasma cannons charged. Particle beam generators hummed with deadly energy. Missile tubes loaded with warheads designed to crack planets. "High Commander," Kreltax said nervously. "Perhaps we should wait. We do not know what these beings are capable of." "I know exactly what they are capable of. They appeared here with their pathetic little fleet, thinking they could intimidate us with words. I will show them what happens to those who challenge the Zorvani Dominion." "R." He pointed at the largest red dot on the tactical display. "That ship, the one that transmitted. I want it destroyed. Fire everything." The Eternal Dominion shuddered as its main batteries unleashed their fury. Plasma bolts and particle beams and missiles streaked across space toward the enemy vessel. 100 other ships joined the barrage. The combined firepower was enough to destroy a small moon. Every single shot passed harmlessly through the target. Vexar watched in horror as his weapons did nothing. The enemy ship sat untouched in space as if the attack had never happened. The plasma bolts flew through its hull like it was not even there. The particle beams scattered against nothing. The missiles detonated uselessly in empty space. "What is this?" Vexar's voice came out as a whisper. "What is happening? What is happening? What is happening?" Kreltax was staring at his sensors with terror in all 4 eyes. "High Commander, the enemy ship is not fully in our dimensional phase. Our weapons cannot interact with their hull. They exist in a state we cannot touch." Vexar felt his legs grow weak. He reached for the arm of his throne to steady himself. Then the enemy ships began to glow with blue energy. And they fired back. The shots did not miss. The first 12 Zorvani cruisers exploded simultaneously. They were the ships closest to the Eternal Dominion. They formed a perfect ring around the flagship. The message was clear to everyone watching. The humans could have killed Vexar first. They had chosen not to. High Commander Vexar stood frozen on his bridge as debris from the destroyed vessels drifted past his viewport. Those cruisers had been crewed by thousands of warriors. They had been armed with the finest weapons in the Empire. And they had been erased from existence in less than a second. "Impossible," he breathed. "This is impossible." Around him, officers were screaming and running and trying to make sense of what had just happened. Sensor stations were overloading with data. Communication channels were flooded with panicked transmissions from other ships. The perfect order of the Zorvani fleet was crumbling into chaos. Admiral Laura Mitchell's face appeared on the screen again. She looked exactly the same as before. Calm. Confident. Completely unafraid. "That was a demonstration," she said. "We targeted only military vessels, with no ground bombardment capability. We have no interest in harming civilians. You have 41 minutes remaining to make your decision." The transmission ended. Vexar turned to Kreltax with wild eyes. "How did they do that? Our shields were at maximum. Our armor is the strongest in the galaxy. How did they destroy those ships so easily?" Kreltax was shaking badly. His scales had turned pale with fear. "I do not know, High Commander. Their weapons seem to operate on principles we do not understand. They fired beams of focused energy that cut through our hulls like they were made of paper. Nothing we have can stop them. Then we will overwhelm them with numbers," Vexar declared. "Order all ships to attack. 2,000 against 300. Even with superior weapons, they cannot survive those odds. High Commander, if our weapons cannot touch them, then our numbers mean nothing." Vexar grabbed Kreltax by the throat and lifted him off the deck. "Do as I command, or I will throw you out an airlock myself." He released the officer and watched him scramble away to send the order. Vexar knew in his heart that Kreltax was right. If the enemy could not be hit, then no amount of firepower would matter. But he refused to accept defeat. He had never surrendered to anyone. He would not start now. Far below on the surface of Zorvan Prime, Emperor Kazrath watched the battle unfold on his private screens. He sat in his throne room, surrounded by advisors and generals and priests. All of them were screaming at each other. None of them had any useful suggestions. "We must